Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be painting my first Warhammer 30k model, Giegor Counterfellhand. Yes, this Space Wolf guy from the Warhammer 30k Legionnaires. So we're going to start off. It's a very actually simple, straightforward box. There's like nothing in it. It's mostly air. This box could be much smaller and probably save some on shipping, and it wouldn't cost as much. But yeah, well, whatever. And so assembly is very straightforward. I mean, this model is very simple to put together. There's not that many pieces. And so then I assembled them up to the point where they would get in the way of painting. His chest is complete, his arms are together, his bolters on the side, his legs are together, but on the side his head is separate and his backpack is separate, as well as his shoulder pads. And then I prime it all with Bright Touch General Purpose Gray Car Primer. Alright, then with Eshin Gray, Gray Sear, and White Scar White, we're going to do pre-coating. So I coat it in Eshin Gray, then from a upper angle, I prime it with Gray Sear, and so we have light and dark values, and then I dry brush all throughout with White Scar White. This picks up heavily on the feet, his claw gauntleted hand, his open hand on his right, and some areas on his backpack and such, but most other areas this isn't as useful, so I selectively did this. I did this only a few parts. I didn't do it all throughout the model because I knew many places this really wouldn't help at all. And now with Liquitex modeling putty, I then just apply it over its base, and then I rapidly dry the top with a hair dryer, and then I just use like a dry brush to add some texture to it. And then with Fenrisian Gray and Lamian Medium, I mix them together to create a wash, like 1 part Fenrisian and 3 parts Lamian and 1 part water. Unfortunately, the Fenrisian was a little too thin, so I had ended up having to apply around 2 coats of this throughout it. And it's subtle shading. The raised areas are brighter, the lower places are darker. So. Alright, so now we're going to add the shading. With French Ultramarine, Magenta, and Mineral Spirits, we're going to create a wash. So we're going to start off with the French Ultramarine, and we're just going to create a thin wash of this, and we're just going to apply it all over. Then what we're going to do is we're going to add a bit of magenta into it. And so the armor has like this color I can't really place. It's this dark, kind of a darker purplish, but it's in specific areas, like on some parts, the lower parts of the shoulder pads, the hands, stuff like that, especially the lightning claw, and some darker areas. So then I apply this magenta mix with the French Ultramarine in these locations to add some color, or some more coloration there. Then I take a makeup sponge and I just wipe it off once it dries, get a good amount of it off. Once it dries, it's able to stay into the recesses better. If it was too wet, the sponge could suck it up. And then once that's done, I take a very soft brush and some mineral spirits. You don't see it because it's like invisible in the metal, but basically I wipe the most raised areas with this brush like a scrub, and it lightens that further, so there's a much brighter top. So I remove the wash from the most raised areas. Alright, moving on, the fur. So with Thondia Brown, Mournfang Brown, XV88, and Rackhearth Flesh, we're going to paint the fur. And so essentially what I do is I take Thondia Brown, apply it all over. Then I'm going to take Mournfang Brown, and I'm basically going to dry brush or overbrush all along the fur and along the flat open parts of the fur legs that are around his legs. If you have the model, you'll know what I'm talking about. Then we're also going to paint like the bottom half of the twin of the tails, or the closer to the edges of the fur along the arms of the creature with XV88 to make it lighter and make some transitional colors. And then we're going to do some Rackhearth Flesh overbrush on the very edges of the fur, basically. It's a little hard to describe, but basically dark color towards the base, lighter color towards the edge. For the tail, it's towards the base, and then brightest at the edge. And it's so-so. Alright, the fur isn't good enough, and this is a character model, so I'm going to go even further. So with Agrax Earthshade, we're going to apply this, so along his arms, the furry arms, we're going to apply in the center to make it the center look darker. Along the twin tails, we're just going to apply it towards the base area. And then what we're going to do is XV88 and Rackhearth Flesh, we're going to go again. So with the bear or wolf pelt thingy, I'm going to paint strong lines of it, or a little bit more overbrushing of XV88 on the head and stuff and along its features, and then very fine highlight of Rackhearth Flesh on the features to make it striking, because overbrushing, dry brushing, it subtly changes, it's not as strong. You have to dry brush for a while to get it, and it kind of is a bit uncontrollable then. So just painting these lines are good. Alright, then, with Steel Legion Drab, Baneblade Brown, Rackhearth Flesh, and Agrax Earthshade, we're going to paint these skulls. He has one up above like a banner, he has one on his chest, and such. And so basically what we're going to do is we're going to take Steel Legion Drab, water down a bit, and we're going to apply it on. And because of the pre-coating that we did, it's going to do perfect, really good highlights right now. And then what we're going to do is we're not going to take Agrax Earthshade and apply it all over. So what we're going to do is we're going to take Agrax Earthshade and for the big skull, apply it along the sharp bones and crevices and the eye sockets. And the same with the small one, we're going to place it along the eye sockets and like some dark crevices. Then we're going to go back with Baneblade Brown and do highlights, paint straight lines on the most obvious areas and such. And then I didn't get it on camera, but with Rackhearth Flesh, we're going to paint it the most raised areas very finely, like less than 10% of each piece, so where the eye catches. Alright, now with Karak Stone, Agrax Earthshade, and Ushabti Bone, we're going to paint the hair. So this was kind of a journey. So I basically paint all the hair, including his eyebrows, mustache, beard, and locks with Karak Stone. Then I apply a very watered down Agrax Earthshade all over to add some shadow and depth all over. Then I go back with Karak Stone and then I pick out all the fibers of hair. I paint straight lines on the big stuff that I can. I do tap tap taps onto his braided locks in order to pick out the things, because doing little tap tap taps with a brush puts a very small amount, so it's easy to control for fine detail. Then we're going to take Ushtabi Bone and basically do the same thing on finer highlights. You're going to have to do a lot of brush control, so one thing to do it is when you get the paint on your brush is to touch it to a paper towel so it gets rid of all the like very wet explosive stuff, and so you can control it better and then like some edge brushing, highlighting and stuff like that, we're able to eventually paint it all. And it's okay. And then I go back with some more Agrax Earthshade, applied another very watered down thing to it, and then I applied some more less watered down Agrax Earthshade in like to his eyes, his mouth, and around where the hair meets the skin. Alright then, with Cadian Flesh Tone, Agrax Earthshade, and I don't show it till later, but Gryph-hound Orange, which is a contrast paint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these colors and I'm going to heavily water them down, very watered down. It's like what I learned from Warhammer Plus, from how the Warhammer painters there do it. So I take Cadian Flesh Tone and I water it down greatly. I apply it on the brush and then I touch the brush to a paper towel and it sucks up a lot of the water. And then I apply it onto his face. Now I make sure it doesn't pool. You don't want it to pool, you just want to apply a thin layer. If it starts to pool anywhere or like bubble up, it's too much and you have to wipe it off or like suck it up with a clean brush and such. And then basically I do the same thing with Agrax Earthshade. I apply it into, I water it down a lot and apply it into certain areas to add shadow. And I go back and like do it with Cadian Flesh Tone back and forth. And so eventually, look at the box and his face is kind of ruddy. So I take the Gryph-hound Orange, water it down heavily, and I apply it in specific places to make it look more ruddy. Then I go back with Cadian Flesh Tone again, and this is more of a back and forth and getting like the depth, shadow, the ruddiness, and the clear skin with very watered down paint. Alright, so with Abaddon Black, Dark Reaper, Fenriserian Grey, and Ulthuan Grey, we're going to paint up like his gun, some things on his backpack, the skull on his chest is on it. So basically we paint these, the gun case and these little wolves and such like that with Abaddon Black, and the diamond thing that his bones on his chest is on. Then we're going to highlight them with Dark Reaper, which is basically filling them in, or in the case of the dogs, just painting highlights on large portions of it. And then with Fenriserian Grey, we're going to paint like the edges, the very fine edges. With the gun, it's the most obvious. And then with Ulthuan Grey, we're going to paint it as a tiny dot on the most raised areas for catching light. Alright, so with Khorne Red, Mephiston Red, Evil Sun Scarlet, and Troll Slayer Orange, we're going to paint these gems and red symbols. So basically with Khorne Red, this is going to be the base color, applied all over. And then with Mephiston Red, we're going to paint, basically fill in 90% of the Khorne Red except for the deepest, darkest recesses. For the gems, we're going to paint pretty much all of it. There's just going to be small little dots of the Khorne Red on the sides of the gem. Then with Evil Sun Scarlet, we're going to paint on the gems like their edges, very obviously with this, and then we're going to paint the edges on all his symbols and stuff. And I didn't get footage of it, but basically with Troll Slayer Orange we apply basically like dots of this on the most raised, most prominent areas within the Evil Sun Scarlet, and for the gems we're basically painting on the point of each gem. Alright, I decide that his face isn't looking good enough, so we go back to it with Screaming Skull, Cadian Flesh Tone, and Pallid Witch Flesh. We're going to paint his face even better. So with Screaming Skull, which is an even brighter color, we're going to apply tiny dots of this all throughout and just do even finer highlights and make his hair brighter. Then, we're going to take a mix of Cadian Flesh Tone and Pallid Witch Flesh. I just maybe like 2 parts Cadian to 1 part Pallid. I just wanted it a bit brighter, and of course we did water this down a lot so it would seamlessly blend in with the rest, and then we apply this and highlights here and there, and yeah, just get his face, like the corners of his face, his nose, some of his raised cheekbones, stuff like that. And then with AK Interactive Ultra Matte Varnish, we seal up everything that we have painted. And then with Liquitex Gloss Varnish, we then just paint all the gems, essentially, and that's it. Now, I'd like to point out, somehow I did not get a picture of the paints I used for this, but basically I used the Vallejo metals, which is basically a dark metal, a medium metal, and then a very bright silver metal. That's what I used. And so with the darkest metal, we filled in his machine joints and stuff like that. I just like doing that. I know it's supposed to be black with gray highlights, basically, but I like the metal. And then with the medium metal, we then applied on all the edges of his metal things, like his chain links and stuff like that. Yeah, basically all the metal, we did a base layer of the darkest metal. We then do a highlight of a mid-metal cover, and then with the brightest silver color, we then apply this on the most raised edges of his bolter gun. His silver is entirely on his lightning claws. Oh, his blade starts off dark, and then we do some mixing in between for lighting and stuff. And basically his blade goes from dark to light on his edges and his blade. And yeah, and so I kind of messed up this step. Alright, now with actually showing the paints I'm going to use Vallejo Gunmetal Gray, Liquitex Transparent Raw or Burnt Sienna, and then Gloss Varnish. And I forgot to show the mix, but I show it later. So basically what I noticed is that with these dark Vallejo metal colors, it becomes a darker metal. And so basically I mix it and then I apply it on all his filigree. Now the reason why I use this colors instead of like the Games Workshop stuff is these things flow very well off the brush. It can be runny if you don't know how to control it right, and you have to keep remixing it, constantly like stir it and then take it on the brush like every couple of seconds every time you go back for it. But it flows off the brush very well and makes it very easy to cover. And so with all his filigree, it was very easy to paint this stuff, well, much easier. The paint just came off really quick and easy and covered it very strongly. Also, I will apologize to Chaos Marines. Perhaps I treated you too harshly because this guy, his filigree is so tiny. I basically had to paint the top of the filigree, or like the center, then the top, and then the bottom. So basically 3 parts each side to get the filigree visible. It was just ridiculous. And then of course, then I went with a lighter color from Gunmetal Gray, which is a darker one, to a lighter metal color, and just applied some more of the transparent burnt sienna. I didn't show the mix or the metal, and then I applied gloss varnish in it, and then with that, this is a lighter color, and then I basically highlighted the filigree. Now, how I did this, like, the best way to explain it, imagine a circle, and I painted the top half of the circle in this, so places that are more raised towards the light or to up, I then painted with this, and this added some light to the color. And then I took a bright silver, which is duraluminum from Vallejo, or you could use like a Runefang steel, and then for the filigree, I painted the edges of the most raised areas, and for the filigree that was like squares and stuff, I put a tap of it on each corner or edge of the filigree. And that is how I painted this metal. It took a very long time. Alright, and now with cerulean blue hue turned into a wash with mineral spirits, I then apply this onto his lightning claw, and it creates this nice bluish hue to it, and it also feels like this metal filigree on the top of the fingers. Yeah, and so I let it dry, then I wipe it a bit, and then I apply it again so it fills in the colors again better. Alright, and now back to the base. It's been well over a night and then some by the time it's dried, so it's solid, it's dried, and so basically I apply Elmer's gel glue all over very carefully to make sure it covers all the edges, and then I apply snow to it. This is the first time I've ever used this snow because I actually never opened it properly, so I had to remove the plastic. I bought this like in 2012 or 13 at Innova Open, so, and yeah, and so I dip it in, and then when it dries, it comes out. However, it really looks plain, like very plain. So what I do is I take some of the extra oil wash I had before, and I apply it on there. This was a good idea, but it caused me some trouble. I should have thinned it down even further so it was thinner because the color was too strong. So what I did was after I dried it, I then reapplied the Elmer's glue gel onto the places that had the blue, and then I glued on more snow to it to sort of like dull the color down. However, I had to do this like a few times to get it like just right, not overpowering, and it kind of covered up all the texture I had. So basically I just had a very flat snow, or not flat, but like rounded snow mound that had some blue in it. So live and learn. First time I've done a snow base. And then with Liquitex Matte Varnish, I then apply this with a little bit of water to help it flow better onto the base, and so that the snow pieces would be solidified in. And then I let it dry, and the snow was as hard as rocks. And then I begin assembly of the body. This took a while. Also, I accidentally bent one of the chains on the bolter thing, and it kind of broke it and made it hard to adhere. And so it took a few tries to get it right on there. And apparently the bolter's supposed to go on before the arm, but what can you do? And yeah, it's just a long process of trying to get it together, trying to fit it together, let it dry properly. And you have to be very careful because you don't want to damage all the paint you just laid. And then finally after that, I then take the model once it's fully assembled and then apply super glue to its feet and then apply it onto the base. But it's gonna fall off. It's really not attached. So what I do is carefully and cautiously drill a hole through the foot. I accidentally pierced through the foot. Oops. And then I put a paper clip through, and I put super glue in it, and then just force the paper clip through, and it gets in, and it's solidly stuck onto the model. And it looks like there's a little bit of snow on his left foot, so it works out in the end. And done. Well, that was an interesting kit. That's my first 30k model, and pretty interesting, I will say. There is a lot of detail on his armor. Even though it's 30k, his armor really doesn't have that. Well, it has a little bit of that, was it like MK3 design in it? So very interesting in the way it works. It's pretty cool. So there's tons of details on them. Apparently there's two I didn't show because I saw it afterwards and it's I was done recording, retired recording. So he has these cords, or this cloth on his sword scabbard. I just painted it up quickly and just small little details like that. But apart from that, he's a fun and interesting kit. As far as what I would give him, for my work, I would give 9 out of 10 because I did incredibly well, above and beyond what I normally would do. The details are very crisp, his colors are very nice and bright, his face is incredible. If it was just the face, it'd be a 10 out of 10. It's the best I've ever done. It's I surprised myself. And the hair, all the strands are clear. That was hard to do, my goodness, that took forever. However, so the reason why it's not a 10 out of 10 is it's base, the fur, and the armor. Now the base, well, that's the first time I did a snow base, and so essentially maybe I should have put some rocks on there. Maybe what I should have done was apply a much thinner oil wash onto the base before I even applied the snow, so the white base ground, so it would appear there, so I would not ruin the many different patterns and stuff that created with the dry brush when the base was still drying. So I didn't do that. That probably would have made the base look more dynamic, more cool, maybe a bit more realistic. I don't know. Oh no, that's kind of like making it like dirt. It's hard to say. I don't know. I've never done snow bases before. As far as the fur, it doesn't really look like there's much color to it. I did my best to fix and highlight things, but it goes from dark to slightly lighter instead of vibrant colored furs. And the armor, so there was this color that is actually on his armor, which I thought was like a purplish magenta. I wasn't able to get it to work right, essentially. That's on parts of his armor to make it have this extra layer of depth and color. I could not get that to work. I even looked and stared at the box art for a long time on the back, because that has the better picture, to try to figure out what this color was, and I straight up couldn't place it. It was purple, brown, or gray. It was it could be any three of those, but I wasn't sure. I couldn't figure it out, and so basically I wasn't able to bring the armor to its full value. Yeah. And yeah. But apart from that, 9 out of 10. A very good start. Warhammer 30k, I have never played it, but a lot of the models are looking pretty cool. So I'm glad this was my first foray, and it was really nice. Alright, so like the video if you like the video, share it if you want to share it, comment if you want to comment, and more to come. Bye.